Hi, everybody. This is Jeff Spees, Quick Mount PV Business Development Manager, and we're going to be speaking for the next hour on the topic of solar roofing best practices. Before we do get started, just a couple quick housekeeping items. Any questions that you may have, feel free to submit them in the question box on the control panel. We tend to avoid unmuting people's microphones because in the past we've experienced considerable audio feedback and it really diminished the quality of the webinar. So what we really are required to do is have people submit their questions through that question box. I do address all the questions as they come in or thereabouts. And with that said, we will go ahead and get underway. All right. Incidentally, let me just open up the question box. I do have a couple questions that have already come in. Let's see. Glenn asks if we had any type of mounting system for flat roofs, and indeed we do. We'll talk briefly about it, but next week on Thursday I'll be conducting a webinar on our low slope mount, which goes into considerable detail. And Glenn also mentioned he noticed he was muted on his control panel, and that is the setting that we have for the webinar for everybody. Albert says good morning, and Michael says still figuring out the controls. So with that said, get underway. What we'll talk about today is who is Quick Mount PV, what are our products. We'll take a look at how mounting was done in the past and compare and contrast it to what we see today with code and standards and practices. We'll address some of the problems in the industry that have led to where we're at today, and talk in detail on solar roofing best practices and the goals that we as a company have of code compliance, fast installation, high quality, and longevity and aesthetic appeal, as well as compatibility with all racking systems. One of the nice aspects of our mounts is they work with virtually all racking systems. There are subtle variations on a couple minor products out there, but by and large, any racking system can be attached to our flash mounts. Quick review of our overall product line. This is representative of most of our products, although we are expanding our line here in the very near future. Our strength has been historically in the arena of steep slope residential roofs for comp shingle, shake, slate, curved flat tile, conduit, accessories, and tools to go along with those products. And our low slope mount, which is pictured in the right-hand column in the center there, again, we have a webinar where we go into detail on low slope mounting considerations next Thursday for those that have an interest. All these products, you can find out all the information we have is posted online. We have a really thorough website that provides information. I think I'm getting a little feedback through my speakers here. Is that you, Rebecca? Okay, hang on, folks. It looks like we have somebody who's on. Let me try to get the microphone settings set. Okay. Sorry about that. All right, so our website has all the information on these products at quickmountpv.com. A little bit about myself. I'm business development manager for quickmountpv.com. Almost said that. I do a lot of speaking and training at all the major industry trade shows and conferences. Also serve as secretary for the industry certification group, which is known as NABCEP, the North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners. Served as director of training for the second largest solar PV distributor from 2007 to 2010. During that time, I produced some of the largest training conferences in the industry, and the solar training webpage for the program was the #1 hit on Google for the search term solar training. And prior to getting into the industry, my degree is in mechanical engineering, spent 20 years in the world of industrial automation, and did a lot of technical product training in the United States and beyond. So I do always like to emphasize early on, there's no better sales tool that a sales representative can have with him than a PV module and some type of an example of how you're going to waterproof the penetrations on the roof. This really addresses a primal concern that most homeowners, business owners have, that if they're going to have their roof penetrated or a PV system put on top of the roof, that they're not going to develop leaks, because leaks are incredibly expensive, as we'll talk a little bit about. You can get a free sample of our flashing product just by going to our website circle that get a SAM, or where it's that button that's circled, you click on it and you'll be taken to a form. It is necessary that you specify which particular mount you're interested in getting. We, by default, send out our classic composition mount, but if you might want the tile mount or our low slope mount for flat commercial roofs, you would need to specify that in the comments section. A little bit about the background of our company, because it really speaks to the evolution of PV installation on rooftops. And the article that you see there is a profile on Solar Pro magazine, the biggest and, in my opinion, best publication in solar PV industry, talking a little bit about the genesis of the company and where we came from. And the folks pictured are Stuart and Claudia Wentworth, which are our founders and owners, and we are a family business. Over 20 years of construction industry, green construction, solar installation, and metal fabrication are the background for both Claudia and Stuart. Very committed to the future of solar power and sustainability, and really educating the industry. In part, programs such as this are an effort to make people familiar with what code requirements and best practices are for the best long-term cost of ownership of PV systems, so doing their best to help contribute to that knowledge base in the industry. Our company is really dedicated to the concept of quality installations, code compliant installations, and long-term waterproofing, again, to keep the cost of PV system ownership as attractive as possible. We feel that that's the best way for the solar industry to continue its growth. And we're the leading manufacturer of residential flash mounts for solar rooftop installations in the United States today. And I think very much due to that effort to educate the industry on proper waterproofing technologies and make products that are quick and easy to install and long-term reliable and provide that best cost of ownership. So why respect the roof? Well, this is a statistic that was reported in the inaugural edition of Solar Pro magazine, and it's really chilling. 80% of all construction-related litigation stems from water intrusions. So essentially, the vast majority, well, the overwhelming majority of lawsuits occur from leaking. And by and large, most of this leaking is from roof problems. This is a statistic that was cited by Rob Hernandez in that inaugural edition of Solar Pro. Keeping in mind that it only takes a single leak to cause those callbacks, roof damage, bad reputation, and lawsuit. And for those that haven't experienced a leak in your home, I have experienced two. And one of them was flashing related, not solar flashing, but just flashing. And it's really surprising how rapid the cost to repair these adds up. Drywall damage on ceilings in particular can be problematic if that leaks in the kitchen and you have to repaint expansive areas of ceiling to match the color. So it's not an insignificant issue, and the cost really racks up quickly. So solar installers must think and act like roofers when stepping onto a roof to make any penetrations. Who would install a skylight or vent jack without complete waterproof flashing? And yet today, we still see, I wouldn't say most, but a substantial number of installations that are being installed with absolutely no flashing to waterproof that penetration. So obviously the question is, how would a roofer approach mounting PV or solar thermal to a customer's roof? And in the end, how can we maintain that roof warranty from the roofer? We'll talk a little bit about what code is for solar mounting systems. And this is an image that actually appeared on a major solar publication a couple years back. And it's really surprising to see something like this show up, in large part because there's several fundamental errors with this installation. Number one, and first and foremost, OSHA does require now that everybody who works up 6 foot above the ground, in most cases, would require some form of fall protection, whether it be a fall protection gate or some type of self-arrest fall harness. And failure to use fall protection is a violation of OSHA that they have been actively targeting in the eastern part of the United States. So that's the first problem that you see with this. Incidentally, the exemption for residential roofers on wearing fall protection for OSHA regulations did expire last year, and now OSHA is, again, actively pursuing that. The other interesting problem with this installation, if you look at the mounts, what they have is a special type of a bracket with two lag bolts that attach it directly to the roof, and you can see that the bolts on all the mounts are going right up the same truss. It's really a less desirable way to install. Ideally, what you're going to do is stagger those mounts every other truss so that you don't have to drill as many holes in a single truss. From a structural standpoint, that would be highly desirable. Equally concerning is the fact that the feet that are installed have no flashing, no way to effectively waterproof the system other than some sealant in the hole. This not only fails to meet code and best practice, but is a vulnerable liability for your business and also voids your roof warranty. When you do not use flashing, essentially the roof itself is compromised and the roofer will no longer take responsibility for leaks that crop up. In the past, attaching an L bracket or some type of L foot directly to a composition roof might look okay at first, and this is often what we had seen until about 4 or 5 years ago. This was the norm on composition shingle roofs, where you might have on the left-hand side a product that's known as a tile track, which is just bolted in the center of the track to the roof with some sealant liberally squirted around the head of the bolt, or the L foot on the right-hand side directly to the roof. But these penetrations were dependent entirely on sealant for waterproofing. We've seen that over time, leaks and corrosion are inevitable. So in this example, this is an installation that our owner, Stuart Wentworth, actually was called out to investigate a few years ago. And what he found was a comp shingle roof where the tile track product was installed vertically, but there was no flashing, just sealant around the perimeter. And when we removed it, actually they had a leak in this house. What we noticed was the obvious signs of water intrusion, despite the fact that there was a liberal amount of goop used around the perimeter of the tile track. So it's just not sealant. With heating and cooling cycles, breaks down, and that seal eventually lets loose. And it may not be a major breach, but it might be a small breach that's right in the same vicinity of where a little bit of water can become dammed or pool up, and it can leak in and cause wood rot and extensive damage. So it's unrealistic to depend on sealant for decades of waterproofing service. Albert just asked a question. Albert asked if we will be able to get a copy of your slides, and indeed you can do so. And in fact, Rebecca, if you're able to hear and just shoot over the link to all the participants here as to where they can download the slides, or you could just go to our website to the training page, the same place that you likely went to register for the webinar, and you'll find a link to be able to download a PDF version of this presentation. Okay, so moving on here. So quick mount PV products have a full line of flashings for a broad range of steep slope roofs. We're the recognized standard for 100% code compliant watertight mounts that meet or exceed the National Roofing Contractor Association and the Tile Roofing Institute standards and best practices. Now there's some gray area between what differentiates a standard from best practice from code. But effectively speaking, we've looked at all applicable industry standards, best practices, and codes in designing our products and choosing the features of those products. We meet all applicable building codes like the International Building Code, International Residential Code, state building codes. We do have patented waterproofing technologies in our product, and up to 50-year life with an all aluminum flashing and mount and stainless steel hardware. So we'll talk now about code, because I think this is a very important topic that deserves a bit of focus. And the applicable codes that you see are pictured on the right-hand side. This is most, but not all, of the codes and standards that you're likely to run into. So you can go to our website and look at the relationship between the code authorities, code enforcers, and solar installers. And I'll start with the center is the authority having jurisdiction. Your local building department has the authority to establish requirements for their jurisdiction, and they can also overrule elements of state or international building codes. In some cases, what you'll find are more stringent code requirements for wind speed than local code requirements than state code requirements due to local variations that make the wind speeds a little bit more problematic. On the circle just outside of the center of the target there is OSHA, and OSHA has tremendous authority over anything relating to construction, electrical systems, plumbing systems. So they establish the safety practices that must be abided by all contractors throughout the United States. And then we'll look at the chart. The International Building Code is the primary structural code that most folks focus on. Equally important are the state building codes that often add to international building code requirements to address local variations in weather and things of that nature. The International Residential Code does address topics such as flashing and the requirement and distance from penetration that flashing must extend. National Fire Protection Association is going to take on the NFPA increased importance in coming years with some of the fire requirements that they're implementing into the International Building Code. International Code Council is a certification process for products that comply with the International Building Code, and our classic composition mount is certified by the International Code Council. Underwriters Laboratory has not had as much involvement in the waterproofing of roofs to date. However, there are new elements of UL standards such as 2703 that can have an impact on the world of flashing. Roof manufacturer and preserving warranties is certainly an important consideration, and more often than not, the roofing manufacturer will build upon the established structural and waterproofing codes that exist and define very carefully what the requirements are for meeting the terms of their warranty if it is to be preserved. SMACNA is the Sheet Metal and Air Conditioner Contractors National Association, who they've specified in particular that galvanized is only suitable for temporary structures of 15 years or less, and therefore we consider galvanized to not be an acceptable flashing material per the guidelines that SMACNA has established. The Asphalt Roof Manufacturers Association, of course, applies to any built-up roof or composite shingle type roof, and then NRCA, the National Roofing Contractors Association. I saved them for last in part because they do some significant education of the best practices of roofing when solar installations are involved, and Jim Kirby, who's done that training for years, is really somebody worthy of listening to when you want to learn more about how roofing is best done to provide the best cost of ownership. There are a couple certification programs worthy of mention. NABCEP has an electrical focus. That's the organization that I serve as secretary for. And my coworker and our director of training, Johan Elfsen, is on the board of the Roofing Integrated Solar Energy certification program, which has a roofing focus and is a branch off from the National Roofing Contractors Association. So those two certifications really speak directly to the concerns of our customers. All right, looks like we may have a question here. And Glenn says, would love to have a copy of the PowerPoint. So thank you for that information. And Glenn, I hope you've already gotten that link from Rebecca. If not, Rebecca, do send everybody the link to download the presentation. A few key points about roofing code. The International Building Code, International Residential Code, and State Building Code all require flashing at all roof penetrations. And let me start by saying that a PV system puts a lot of stress on a waterproofed penetration because as the temperature increases and decreases, the racking system grows and shrinks. Every day it performs that annual expansion and contraction, and this puts a flexing movement on most, if not all, the penetrations throughout the day, throughout the year, and that waterproofing system has to be able to withstand that kind of everyday movement on the penetration. The National Roofing Contractor Association states no exposed fasteners on shingle roofs, so they don't want to have any kind of fastener that needs to have an elastomeric seal around it. They prefer to see something that's protected by metal. SMACNA, which is the Sheet Metal and Air Conditioning National Contractors Association, states no galvanized on roofs exceeding 15-year lifespan. So these are three key elements that must be considered. You need to have flashing, and galvanized is not suitable for more than 15 years. So our best selling mount that you see pictured here is what we call the classic composition mount. It works with all standard racking systems. The beauty is what you'll have available is a machined thread with a bolt that you can attach any conventional L-foot like is pictured on the bottom image there. We use a patented waterproofing technology and one bolt installation that really speeds up the installation process and fortunately doesn't require any shingle cutting. This has been a common practice with many flashings used prior to the development of the classic composition mount and introduction in 2006, but it really speeds up installation because now you don't have to cut in the shingles. It is all aluminum and stainless hardware providing 50-year life, 100% code compliant, meeting or exceeding all roofing codes and NRCA best practices, and approved by a lot of roofing manufacturers that make composition shingles. Also certified by the ICCES program. What we do is we have a special patented waterproofing technology. I've got a cutaway image coming in a moment or two, but the beauty is that we have a reliable 30-year seal that's spaced off the roof by 0.7 inches. We use 2 EPDM washers to prevent moisture from getting into the little cap of the unit that's raised off the roof, and we have a thick all aluminum flashing and mount that have 50-year life expectancy. So just to see what's going on underneath that Q block, as we call it, what we do is we press fit that cylindrical, this is a cross-sectional view, so there's that cylindrical flute, as we call it, that's pressed, I'm sorry, it jumped ahead too quick. The cylindrical flute that's pressed into the plate, and then over the top of that we put the yellow Q block, and you'll see the sealing washer is sealing. When you tighten down on the blue nut, what it does is it seals up across the top of that flute, and then you have the EPDM washer above it with the L foot and the nut and washer that seals the top. So the Q block, of course, is this aluminum block. We have the lag bolt that then goes down into the truss, and your L foot, and your hex nut, and primary sealing washer. It's important to understand that your sealing surface is raised 0.7 inches above the surface of the flashing. And the secondary sealing washer, of course, will just prevent any water from settling in the Q block. And what we see is our product is often well, I guess what we see often people using to save money are flashings that use a EPDM washer pressed between the L foot and the flashing. The dilemma is that the seal on this design is really at the water level, so when you have rain and water running down the roof, the rubber seal over time will deteriorate and becomes a leak risk, whereas with our product the seal is raised off the roof, so that becomes much less of a vulnerability over the long term. We also make our flashing a bit bigger than code requirements. Code actually specifies that you have penetration that's 4 inches from the flashing that extends 4 inches from the edge of the penetration. We actually make our flashing 6 inches wide, and this gives us a little extra room for things like wind-driven rain protection. It's always beneficial to have a bit of extra space on either side, which will give you also the capability of still meeting the requirement of 4 inches from edge of penetration if you drill a bad hole. Common problem that some solar installers experience is sometimes even if you measure the spacing between your penetrations exactly 24 inches on center, which is a common rafter spacing, what happens is sometimes those trusses are warped, and where the truss would be if it were straight, unfortunately you hit dead air. When that happens, of course, you have to figure out how far you are from the truss. Now, a common process that some roofers use is just take a piece of wire coat hanger that's bent into the shape of an L, insert it into the hole, and rotate it until you find out where the edge of the truss is. And then you can re-drill your hole. If you use our flashing, you'll likely still have 4 inches of coverage from the hole that you drilled that was bad. Of course, I would still recommend putting some sealant around that bad hole that you just drilled with your 7/32 bit. There's also thicker flashing. Our flashing is 50 thousandths of an inch thick. Now what this does is it minimizes compression deflection. Now I've got a good image coming up that will show you how that works. Another problem that we've historically seen is that flashings don't extend above what we call the third course. So notice in the lower left hand corner, that if you lift where there's a keyway and that flashing doesn't extend up under the drip edge of the shingle above where that keyway is, you're not considered to be properly flashed. So in the example on the left, the only way that they would have been able to accommodate that is to move the penetration further up on the roof and cut the shingle around the hump in the flashing so the top of the flashing could get above the third course. And since that wasn't done, that was considered an incorrect installation. Most flashings that are of the design you see do require that the shingles be cut, and this tends to be done with razor knives and tends to be somewhat of a time-consuming process to do accurately and cleanly, and sometimes we see problems result. So a couple problems. If you are installing flashings that are thinner than ours, it's possible, especially on a warmer day, whenever your roof temps, not the ambient temp, when the actual temperature of the roof surface itself is over 85 degrees Fahrenheit, this can cause the shingles to soften and thin flashings can deflect when torqued down. So what happened was the test you saw was, let me go ahead. Before I mention this particular test, just want to underscore the fact that shingle temperatures can be up to 60 degrees hotter than ambient temperatures on warm days. On cool days, they can still be 30, 40 degrees hotter than the ambient temperature. And if it's over 85 degrees shingle temp, the asphalt starts to soften and becomes potentially able to be compressed easier. So the test that we did here was on an 80-degree day, and our director of training took and installed our product, and he used an impact gun as the standard practice in the industry, and he torqued our flashing on the upper surface there till it was till the Q block, the block itself, stopped rotating, which means you've got everything in proper tension. He then performed the same installation where he torqued the fastener on the flashing below with the L foot until the L foot stopped rotating. And when that happened, it was a warm day again, that sucked the asphalt down under the L foot and caused the flashing to deflect up on the side, which makes the flashing vulnerable to wind-driven rain. The penetration now becomes vulnerable to wind-driven rain. You can see that the deflection extends almost to the point where the L foot is meeting the flashing, and that would be a worrisome situation when you've got rainy, windy days. Problems that we've seen with flashings that rely purely on a EPDM boot is that these boots can suffer from many problems. In the upper left corner, inverted boot is common when that flashing is installed on the post and sometimes pushed a little too far. And unfortunately, the only way, practically speaking, to fix that would be to use something kind of sharp around the edge and pull the flashing back up. But unfortunately, you set up a site for a crack to start and propagate. Shingle cutting problems are pictured in the upper right, where if you aren't careful when you're cutting the shingles, you can raise them up, making them again vulnerable to wind-driven rain and water intrusion and just your shingles peeling up on the side. You really need to make certain when you're doing the shingle cutting on any cone style flashing that you get a half-inch perimeter from where the shingle is to where the base of that cone is. The rubber boot losing the grip on the left and cracked rubber boots, these are things we see, especially in coastal environments, within 1 to 2 years on flashings that require rubber boot. Now you'll notice that the flashing problems we're showing here are on pipe flashings, and in large part that's because there's many pipe flashings, so it's easier to get sense what's happening statistically on pipe flashing. The dilemma is that pipe flashings are relatively easy to service and fix. You can just generally pull those out, put a new one in, and away you go. The problem with trying to service a flashing on a PV array is that you have to pull or remove the entire array to access any of the flash points, or at least pull the entire row of modules to access the flashing. So it's very expensive to replace the flashing, and that's why these problems are best avoided. Okay, so I've got an interesting little issue coming up here. So no shingle cutting required is another nice feature of our product. When installed properly, the block will be about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch under the drip edge of the second course of shingle as pictured. And when done in that manner, the upper edge of the flashing gets all the way up under the third course of shingles in standard kinds of shingle reveals, as it's called, dimensions. Bear with me while I take a quick sip of coffee, folks. So shingle cutting, fortunately not required. This would be how the flashing would be installed if you had a cone style flashing, but with the classic comp flashing, there's no need to cut the shingle. It results in a fast, clean, attractive mount, and really, would you expect anything less from a company who decided to name itself Quick Mount PV? So the proper flashing placement, as was underscored by the previous image, just to make sure everybody's comfortable, you want to insert the flashing all the way up so there's about 1/4 to 1/2 inch of space between the drip edge of the first course, or the hole where the hole is located, and the bottom edge of the flashing. When it's done in that manner, you're going to have that flashing up under the third course. On the left-hand side of this image, we do see some people sometimes, unfortunately, are leaving that flashing. They slide the flashing up until they hit the nail line in the second course, and they stop pushing it further up, which means that the flashing hangs over the drip edge. It may not be up under the third course where it would be needed to be properly waterproofed, and now under that drip edge of the flashing, you can have debris build up and actually rot away the shingles underneath that. So it's very important that you have about, at least the flashing should be up to the drip edge, preferably about 1/4 inch above the drip edge of the first course, in order for it to have the best long-term protecting capability. Okay, so the installation procedure, what you see there is what's called a roofing bar, sometimes referred to as a shingle ripper, although I'm not a fan of that terminology. What you'll do is you'll slide the roofing bar in between the courses of shingles where you're going to insert the flashing, and you have to find wherever there's a nail and remove the nail with that shingle ripper. So we sell a roofing bar that actually has these little hooks on either side of the head and allows you to pull the nail out. We actually show a video of that on our website. You then would drill, and this is important, a 7/32 pilot hole for a lag bolt right in the center of your truss. Now, there's a lot of questions about what the best manner is to find the center of truss, and I've seen a lot of techniques used, ranging from hammer tapping, which, if you have a single layer of comp shingle on your roof, may be very straightforward to find a truss. There are those that will get in the attic and measure the truss spacing, a practice I would strongly encourage, and then they'll map that out on the roof. But when doing that, it's important to take a look for any trusses that may be deflected. And ideally, what you're going to do is locate your hole, your 7/32 pilot hole, in the center third of a 2x6 or 2x truss. Well, you've only got an 1.5 inch wide target, and you need to now locate your penetration within that center 1/2 inch of that truss. So it would be desirable, if possible, when you're on a comp shingle roof, to use something like a scan tool that can actually measure through the comp shingle, through the decking, to the truss below. There are a couple tools that allow you to do that, one being the Bosch D-Tect 150, that's D-TECT, Bosch D-Tect 150 scan tool. It allows you to shoot through several layers of comp shingle to accurately mark the edge of your truss, so you can make certain that your truss is centered in the center third of or that your hole is in the center third of the truss. Another tool that installer has shared with me that he uses to accurately find the center of the truss is he has an infrared scanning tool that he uses for his energy efficiency business. It's about a $2,000 tool. Incidentally, the Bosch D-Tect 150 is about a $750 tool at Amazon.com. But the good infrared scanners that are often used by home energy efficiency contractors can look at a roof early in the morning and see very visibly the outline of where the trusses are versus just the decking and the roof material. So those are a couple techniques. I've seen installers, although I don't endorse the practice, just drill holes on top of the roof till they find a truss and then measure from there to the rest of the penetrations. The problem with that technique is when you just drill, not only are you creating a lot of holes, but it's not the most accurate way of finding the edge of the truss. Either way, that's a quick commentary on some of the procedures that I've seen used, and my preference would be to use a tool like the Bosch DTEC 150, or at the very least, get in the attic, map out all the trusses, and you might even opt to start your hole to find the accurate first hole. Drill a small hole at the edge of the truss in the decking on your first penetration, and then measure accurately from there to map out the roof. Then add sealant to your pilot hole and make sure it's a roofing manufacturer approved sealant so you can preserve your warranty. Slide the quick mount into place. Drive the hanger bolt into the rafter. Now again, I'll say that I show approximately 13 foot-pounds of torque. On a cold day, that would be sufficient. I will reiterate, though, that if it's a warm day, you have to be careful. Grab the block while you're inserting the hanger bolt and rotate the block. And as soon as it grabs, as soon as this rotation stops, stop torquing down on the bolt, because you've achieved proper insertion of the fastener, and that will avoid the flashing getting potato chipped or deflected up on the sides, as we already discussed. Our product being thicker is more resistant to that, but if you really torque the heck out of it, you can deflect any flashing. You'll then add your EPDM rubber gasket, attach your rails, and move on to the next row. It looks like we have a couple questions that have come in. Let me take them. Let's see. What constitutes, Michael asks, as a roof penetration? Do pipe clamps count? All pipe clamp penetrations to be flashed? Well, a penetration, Michael, would be classified as any attachment that goes through the roofing deck itself. Now, one might ask why a nail that attaches a comp shingle doesn't have to be flashed, and the reason is that there's no external forces, functionally speaking, that are causing that nail to flex over time. With a PV racking system, because it's a metal racking system mounted to a wood roof, its expansion and contraction is a different rate than the wood roof and the comp shingle roof below it. So what it does is it flexes on the connection point on the mount every day, in and out, expansion, contraction, heating, cooling, and that flexes the waterproofing for years. Sealant is not really considered sufficient to resist that kind of flexing day to day over 30 years, whereas a metal flashing in the style that we've designed will indeed perform that waterproofing over the years. Larry asks, if codes are minimum standards and an AHJ has limited experience with your product, can we obtain documentation for your products to submit to the AHJ in question? Absolutely. We do provide all the documentation and engineering test report information for our products at our website, Larry. You can download those easily by going to quickmountpv.com and looking in our products section and selecting the particular product in question. Kyle asks, do you ever have any problems with crevice corrosion between the aluminum flute and the lag hardware? No, actually we don't at all. There's low galvanic reaction between the stainless steel fastener and the flashing, but when the flashing is installed and the stainless fastener is installed too, there's really no contact, because the EPDM washer it prevents contact. So there's no problem with crevice corrosion there. Ryan asks, when tightening down the top nut of the lag bolt, is it best to have the Q block square or at an angle? Excellent question, Ryan. If you'll look at the image on the screen right now, number 6, where it says add EPDM rubber gasket, you'll note that the block is turned at a 45-degree angle. This would be desirable more so in wet climates. In dry climates, not as big a concern. Here in Arizona, where I reside, when it rains, man, every puddle, every pond dries up pretty darn quickly. So if you're in a wetter climate, though, it would be desirable to angle the block in a manner to facilitate water draining quickly and not building up moisture at the interface of the block, and it becomes less of a debris dam for those roofs that might be subject to pine leaf litter or other types of debris. Okay, next question from Kyle says, if an installer misses a rafter when drilling a pilot hole, is sealant sufficient? I have seen wooden dowels used for misses. Yep, you can use wooden dowels, sealant. I've seen people insert small pieces of aluminum flashing to provide additional protection there, Kyle. If it's within 4 inches from the edge of the flashing on our product, we feel comfortable that that would be constituted as legally and effectively flashed, especially when backed up with some sealant. So I wouldn't be opposed to putting a small amount of felt paper under there with some sealant just to keep it in on both the top and the bottom. So it's not a defined technique per se, but there's a lot of ways to do it. Okay, Albert asks, step 6 was stainless side up. Stainless side up. I'm not sure what that might refer to, Albert, if you could clarify. James Kirby, my buddy Jim Kirby's here. He says, Jim, is this the Jim Kirby that I know? Jim is now with the Center for Environmental Innovation in Roofing, SEER, and as their PV expert. He's got some lofty title of vice president or something of that nature. And Jim says, and each roofing nail is essentially flashed by the shingle above it. So thank you, Jim, for that additional clarification. So what Jim is saying, that a nail itself, naturally by nature of the design of comp shingle roofs, is covered by the comp shingle above it. And as anybody who's ever had to play around on a comp shingle roof knows, on a hot day, that asphalt does melt enough to create a nice seal, and ideally that's the seal you want to preserve over the years. Erica says, what is the allowable margin of error for installing the hanger bolt so that the EPDM gaskets still make good contact if the bolt is not perfectly straight? Well, as one might imagine, you want to make certain that your fastener, well, first of all, that your pilot hole, and this is the reason why pilot holes I feel are doubly important, that the pilot hole itself is perpendicular to the roof surface. Now, roofs do undulate. There's a little bit of movement. And so when you insert the hanger bolt, it's unlikely, if your pilot hole is reasonably perpendicular to the roof surface, that you're going to have any misalignment there, and that sealing washer down below is going to seal. I do know installers that sometimes will squirt a dollop of roofing manufacturer accepted sealant in the cavity before they put the EPDM rubber gasket on, and then they perform their assembly just to provide a little bit of additional sealing capability. And Jim Kirby says, sure is, Jeff. Jim, it's great to have you here, my friend. Hope all's well, and look forward to talking with you soon. Okay, so let's continue on with the discussion here. And, what we really pride ourselves on is a product that's quick to install, but you're not compromising long-term waterproofing capability. So in the end, our strong engineering allows for further spans. In some cases, you can span every third rafter and have sufficient strength for the jurisdiction you're in, resulting in less penetrations, lower cost. And this statistic I really like from Matt Steiner, Plumbing and Electric Heating, says quick mount PV saves our crew at least 4 hours per job with zero chance of leaks. And that's important because an average PV installation tends to range between 2 and 3 days. And if you can save 4 hours on the roof, you now have eliminated an additional trip to the job site, which really does help the bottom line profitability of a contractor company. We do post all of our engineering test results on our website. You'll notice here with our classic composition mount, we showed the American Wood Council's statistics for pullout of a lag bolt in wood, and we also show the in this case it would be in Doug fir 3,900 pounds of pullout, and we show the shear force capacity or the side force capacity when you've got the classic comp mount and those different types of wood. So you can see that it's pretty darn strong both in shear and in pullout, making it a solid arrangement that can hold a PV system on even without as many penetrations as weaker mounts. What we would encourage people do is try to stagger your penetrations so you're not drilling as many holes in a single truss like that image we had shown earlier. So again, when you do stagger those and you span them farther, you're going to reduce your overall costs. Product works with virtually all types of racking configurations. You don't see this practice as much where you angle the modules off the roof, but if you have a roof where the ridge line is north-south and you want to try to get those modules facing a little more south, you might opt for a configuration shown here, and those standoff legs, of course, attach just fine to our mounts. We do have engineering reports for standard racking systems like Unirack and Pro Solar and Iron Ridge. Iron Ridge in particular has a really strong, stiff rail that allows you to achieve those greater span distances to reduce the number of penetrations. We also have approval from roofing manufacturers that our product is suitable for use on their roof and won't void warranty. Here's a couple letters that we've got from GAF and Owens Corning and We have one recently from Malarkey, and check with our sales group for whatever letter you may need. Available in 3 finishes. Now, aluminum mill, or just the standard old aluminum metal color, is the least expensive, most common, but for those people that are in a coastal area or want longer protection, we do offer anodization. You can either get clear anodized, which is going to give you longer life in a coastal environment, or bronze anodized. Now, bronze anodized, don't let the name fool you, it is a black color, so sometimes called black anodized. It does not only improve the durability, especially in coastal areas like Florida, where anodized is required by most inspectors today, but it also improves the appearance and the appearance. And what you'll notice is, if you're going to use it just for aesthetic appearances, because you want to have black modules, black frames, black back sheets, black rails, now you want to have black mounts, well, you only need to position those mounts on the perimeter of the array, and you can use the less expensive aluminum mill flashings on the interior of the array where they aren't visible once you put those modules to cover up our beautiful flashings. Inside each box of mounts, you're going to get 12 mounts. The flashing, of course, is 50 thousandths thick, and it's a 12 by 12 dimension. Most other flashings are narrower at 9 inches wide. That provides the bare minimum of code compliance and no protection for that stray extra hole that might accidentally be drilled. The hardware kit that is included does have everything you're going to need: the hanger bolts, the washers, the hex nuts. So you'll just assemble the sealing washer and a single hex nut onto the bolt before you go on the roof, and then you'll assemble the extra sealing washer and nuts and washers at the top to hold your outfit on once you got the mount installed. We do have a newer product that we introduced last year called our new roof comp mount. We're going to probably change the name of that pretty soon to the QBase comp mount, because sometimes people are using these as retrofit too. Oftentimes what you'll find is roofers in particular have I guess one might call it an affinity for a cone style flashing. So the classic comp flashing would be really suitable for retrofit, can be used on new roofs too. I still like that style of product, and really gives a quick, easy installation, which reduces labor costs and prevents you from having to cut the roof. The new roof comp mount is really for those contractors that have an affinity for a cone style flashing, and in the case of the new roof comp mount, uses our super strong QBase in post. The other benefit of this design is it allows you to use 2 lag bolts per penetration, which is a requirement in some jurisdictions in places with heavy snow loads, like in some counties in Colorado. The other benefit when using this on a new roof is you can very accurately locate your penetrations right in the center third of the truss to preserve the structural integrity that truss is capable of achieving. So in a new roof comp mount for a new roof installation, what you'll do first is snap your chalk lines where your trusses are and drill all your holes. Secure the QBase to the roof with lag screws, and then screw the standoff into the QBase. You'll then cut the composition shingles around the QBase, install the flashing, and then put the rest of the comp shingles in. When you're done, it really looks nice and super strong, super waterproofing over a 30-year life. One other thing I like to highlight for folks is make them aware that there's some products out there that can make installation a little safer and easier. So when you also want to protect your roof surface, and if the roof gets under 45 degrees or over 85 degrees, it becomes much more subject to damage. Obviously brittle at the cold temps and very soft at the high temps. And the granules that protect the asphalt over the life of the shingle can easily get knocked off at any temperature, but especially at these extreme temperatures, or these high and low temperatures. I don't know if I'd call them extreme. You'll want to, of course, check your shingle manufacturer warranty to find out what their suitable safe working temperature is. And if you're going to be working on a roof outside of that temperature range, a couple approaches that I've seen successfully use. Spaghetti matting is one product that can be used, so that at least you're not getting the abrasion on the roof surface and you're dampening any compression that your feet may do to the roofing material. In the case of tile, it helps in slippery conditions, and it protects the composition shingles from damage, of course, and also kind of becomes a nice grippy mat to put your tools on so they don't slide off a roof, especially if it's a little steeper of a slope. It costs only about $400 for a 4x20 roll. Cougar paws are another strategy I've seen people that work a lot on comp shingle roofs use, and these are just special boots with soles that can be replaced, and the sole itself is a real soft rubbery foam material that prevents you from tearing up the roof as much when you're walking around on it. You want to also be very careful on any comp shingle roof to not pivot. The goal is to pick your foot up and place it down and pick up and place down, not to shuffle, not to pivot. And these boots do minimize the damage, so you can just check out their website, cougarpaws.com. Now we'll talk briefly about shake, and let's check the questions here. It appears we have no more, so we'll continue on. Shake is a more challenging roof material to flash in many cases, oftentimes not well suited to retrofittable flashing, but we do have here a flashing that's based on our Q-block concept with that flute that is designed for shake, and it is a larger flashing, 18 by 18 inches in size, has all the same benefits of the classic comp mount, works with the natural waterproofing system of the shake roof. So in the manner that it's installed here, what you have are interspersed courses of felt paper and shake. And what you would do, of course, is you can retrofit this product if you're careful, but you would install the flashing so that the upper edge is underneath the course of felt paper above, and that's the real waterproofing on a shake roof, is that felt paper. So you want to make sure, again, the flashing gets up under the course of felt paper above, and if it's an established roof, trying to slide that flashing up under there may be a bit more challenging. So if you have any questions on this topic, feel free to give a call to our office and inquire further. The shake roof box contents, pretty much 12 flashings and all the hardware you're going to need, and things to consider before installing tile roofs. Okay, folks, tile is extensively used here in the Phoenix area where I live. 90% of solar, more than 90% of solar is on tile roofs, and it takes longer to waterproof a tile roof than a comp shingle roof. You want to select the best attachment method, whether you are lagging directly into rafters or deck mounting into plywood, a less desirable mounting configuration, sometimes the only option, or blocking between rafters, my personal choice, because when you take a 4x4 block of wood and you install it crosswise between two rafters and just tack it in place in the rafters, and then you use that block as your attachment point, that's a solid attachment point that takes any structural it eliminates the compromising of the structure when you drill a hole into the outer core of a truss, especially if you have a penetration that blows out the side of the truss. That can really weaken a truss. Actually, there's some studies being proposed right now by some of the national labs to examine exactly that issue. So something to be very sensitive to. Inspect the subroof and see, do you have plywood? If it's been built since in the last 20 years, the likelihood is you're going to have oriented strand board, also known as OSB decking material. And if it's OSB decking, realize that OSB is not rated to hold fasteners in any significant manner. Plywood, yes. OSB, no. Skip sheeting means that you don't have a solid wood decking. You have strips of material that are spaced apart from one another, typically done in wet country to facilitate drying of the roofing materials after the frequent rains they get in really wet climates. Your felt paper, you have to look at what might be in place there. If it's a real lightweight felt paper, that may not have the long-term waterproofing integrity of a heavier felt paper or synthetic felt paper that's used under the tile. And butyl sometimes is used as a waterproofing mechanism, but I'm a little less comfortable over the long term with butyl than some of the other waterproofing mechanisms. And finally, check its condition. Is there evidence of previous leaks, termite damage, or wood rot? This is very important to do on any roof, in particular with tile. Perform structural analysis for the mounting, determining your wind, snow, and seismic loads, consulting your local building department. In essence, do your research with your local building department and local building practices before you tackle tile roof. So the two general product groups that we have for tile would be the universal tile mount depicted on the left-hand side, and you'll note that the same exact product can be used both in curved and flat tile applications. On the right-hand side, we have a product we refer to as the specialty flat tile mount, and it does really nicely blend into a flat tile roof. Aesthetically, it's very attractive. The limitation to this technology is it must be installed in most cases with blocking between the rafters, because the location of your penetration is right in the center of a tile, which is unlikely to fall exactly where the truss is. Occasionally you might get lucky and there's a truss under there. More often than not, you're going to be blocking between rafters with a 4x4 to have sufficient material to hold to bite into. In some cases, you can deck mount with a specialty flat tile mount right into the deck, but only with 3/4 inch thick or 3/4 inch thick or thicker plywood, and that's not very common out there anymore. The universal tile mount does meet all roofing codes. It allows you to install with either 3-coursing or felt paper bibbing. Felt paper bibbing is what's shown in the image on the top. That's nothing more than a horseshoe-shaped piece of felt paper that surrounds the deck level flashing and is inserted up under the course of felt paper above. In the image shown, you'll notice that it was necessary to pry up a batten to slip that felt paper up into the course above. This is my preferred method for waterproofing any tile penetration. It's the long-term most reliable way to do it, but you will note you had to remove several tiles above in order to do the bibbing. This aluminum flashing that we use on top of the tile is dead soft aluminum, and therefore you can mold it to the curves in the tile. And it uses a seamless cone where that cone is spun into the flashing, so there's no crimp or welded connection. That's a vulnerable leak point on many flashings in the industry. Here what we're showing is the felt paper bibbing, and you'll notice in the left-hand image it was necessary to pry up 2 battens, and as you can see you had to pull 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tiles in order to do this. Now in most tile roofs that's not a problem. Here in Arizona they nail about 1 in every 10 tiles down, so these tiles just lift out by hand. But it is oftentimes a little bit less desirable to have to pull as many tiles and pry battens up, but it is, again, the more reliable long-term waterproofing procedure. The alternative consideration would be referred to as 3-coursing, where on the right-hand image, what you do is take your flashing, and you apply a fiberglass mesh around the perimeter of the flashing, and then put down a mastic or a roofing tar material to seal it to the felt paper. So this can be a reliable solution. It's just not quite as long-term reliable. Felt paper bibbing definitely takes the prize in terms of long-term waterproof capability on a tile roof. The procedure to install it, of course, the beauty of tile, one of the nice things is you can accurately find your center of truss. So, that's something that gives a lot of comfort. And when you put your lag bolts in, when they're centered, you do much less to weaken the truss than if that lag bolt's towards one edge or even blows through the edge of a truss. You would install, of course, your deck flashing and waterproofing, and you can see here we're using our shingle ripper or roofing bar to pry up that batten to be able to get the felt paper underneath it. So you might have to pull a nail out of the batten too, but usually you can slide that up under. And then you would reinstall your tiles. In this case, we showed one of the more unusual variations where the post actually comes at a seam between 2 tiles. In that case, what you would do is use an abrasive cutoff saw to just cut a square hole out of the tiles. And then you would install the tile level flashing where it would be molded to the tiles right there and give that really nice seamless appearance. There is pointing out that cone doesn't have a crimped connection. Oriented strand board, not allowed. You cannot mount your base into OSB. If you do so, you essentially have no structural integrity holding those lag bolts in. They can pull right out in a heavy windstorm. Deck mounting, which you would do, in this case they're mounting a 2x between the trusses. I would recommend a 4x to get a full 3 inches of lag penetration into the truss. If you're using a 2x, you're only going to get about, those 2xs are 1.5 inches thick, and typically speaking, pullout ratings are rated by inch, so it might be that would be sufficient if you're especially mounting 4 fasteners like is done with our specialty flat tile mount in the right hand image. So if you have 4 fasteners going into a 2x block, then you likely will have sufficient pullout capacity for the local code requirements. If you're using 4x4 blocking with just a QBase with 2 holes in it, then that would be sufficient to hold it in place. Once you're done, of course, and this is on the left-hand side, I think a really beautiful image of a well-flashed curved tile installation where the flashing is very nicely molded and blends nicely with roofs. Some people take the extra step of actually painting the flashings to match the tile color. You also have the option of using the bronze, aluminum, or the black color flashings if you so desire on the perimeter, just to make it aesthetically more appealing to the particular customer. On the right-hand side, you'll see our specialty flat tile mount and a really nice installation, and that product blends very seamlessly into flat tiles. Next week on Thursday, I will be doing a webinar on low slope mounting of PV systems, where we'll talk much more about the product on your screen right now. We have the product available in several heights. It's a really super robust product that gives a solid, rapid installed mount that can reduce the penetrations. And I won't belabor the point, because again, next Thursday I'll be going into an hour-long discussion on this product and how it stacks up with the other common types of mounting solutions on the market. We'll talk a little bit about penetration-based or ballasted racking systems and what the pros and cons are of each technology. So for those interested, tune in next Thursday and we'll talk much more about that. We offer a couple other specialty products like our conduit mount, and as one might guess, a piece of wood block under the conduit glued to comp shingle would not be considered code compliant and actually can be a safety hazard in the long term. Our conduit mounts raise that conduit off the roof to give your conduit some breathing room, and it won't heat up as much. You won't have your power output of your PV array diminished by the high temperature of the conduit. It also prevents the conduit from being a water and debris dam, which can compromise roofing integrity and waterproofing integrity. It's completely code compliant, waterproof, aluminum, stainless, either comp or wood shake roofs, and it's a 9x12 flashing. It does use clamp sizes in 1/2 inch through 1.5 inches. We also offer the roofing bar I talked about earlier. This is the most beloved piece of bent metal in a solar installer's arsenal, and it's an often stolen tool because people absolutely love it enough to steal it. Highly recommend it. Extensions are available for our flashing, so you can thread a 2.5 inch, 3.25, or a 4-inch length extension onto our mount and still have sufficient load capacity in most jurisdictions. We do have longer hanger bolts for those people that have to span through insulated roofs. And here's a picture of our extension being threaded onto our classic composition mount. And on the right-hand side, you'll notice it lifts the array further off the roof, better ventilation, and easier accessibility, especially if you're using something like a microinverter under that array where you might want to be able to reach it in whenever that inverter does need to be replaced down the road. We do have a wonderful website with up-to-date product info, downloadable support documentation. This presentation can be downloaded at our website along with others, videos on our product installation. We are an education-oriented company, and we want to make our educational tools as accessible as possible. So check out our website, find out more about our products. Respect the roof, because the vital importance of solar rooftop mounting system is unfortunately often overlooked, undervalued. Proper code compliance protects the roof warranty and installer liability, so do it right the first time. You don't have to come back to fix a roof leak, because in the end, flashing is cheap insurance. And Tony gets the prize in my book for the most appropriate quote. When I'm punching dozens of holes to mount a solar array, I need to be certain there are no points of failure, and only quick mount PV gives me that assurance. And Tony, I couldn't have said it better myself. People tend to underestimate the importance of waterproofing over the long term. Realize, folks, you're punching dozens of holes in a roof, and it's a statistics game. In the long run, you don't need all of those penetrations to leak. You only need 1 or 2 out of 30 or 40 on a roof to leak to cause problems for your customers and for your liability considerations. To learn more, we usually train at all the major industry shows. This is a list of what we did this year. The only major show remaining on the list, Solar Power International in Orlando. That's one of the biggies, and it will be taking place in mid-September. Hope to see some of you there. contact us. We really have great tech support, sales support. We've got frequently asked questions on our website, and we really appreciate your participation. Ran a few minutes long, but let me check to see what questions we have remaining. And Erica asks, can the tile flashing serve a slate roof, or will the shake flashing be better? Very appropriate question, Erica. In fact, slate is more relevant to shake. And what I would encourage you do is Marshall Green, who's our technical trainer based in New York, is really well versed in roofing structures, having come from the construction trades through his entire career, and has taken on, since he's in the backyard of slate usage, the Northeast, the task of educating contractors out there on how to safely flash a slate roof. It is more complicated. It's a beautiful roof when done properly, and when flashed properly, really gives many decades of waterproofing service. Those are the kinds of roofs, when installed properly with our flashings, can literally last upwards of 50 years with the modules, because many modules have a forecasted life expectancy of upwards of 50 years today. Kyle asks, do you have a recommended method product for low slope tar and gravel roofs common in the Southwest? Kyle, that gets into the realm of what we refer to as a built-up roof. And that low slope webinar will be next Thursday, and I will be going into detail on the products and procedures that are available for flashing in that manner. Chad waits. Hey, Chad, it's great to see you. I didn't realize you were here. Wonderful to have you online. And Chad's one of my new Facebook friends. So I'll hope to see you in the not too distant future, Chad. And one thing I do want to point out is that flash tile hook that will be so important for the Arizona market. We've unveiled it in some trade publications and at InterSolar, but the actual product will be debuting at Solar Power International, and we'll be going on a bit of a travel blitz around Arizona, including down your way in Tucson, to bring the tile hook over. And I really think that that's going to be a big product in the industry, because it's the first way to mount solar that's really clean looking, that it can be flashed. All the tile hooks to date are unflashed products. Chris says, what's the name of the Bosch product again? That's the Bosch Detect TECT 150 scan tool, and it can scan through about 6 inches of roofing material. And we found right in our tests that we've done with the version that we have, it's quite accurate at locating the edge of the truss. So a wonderful way to locate your penetrations. Drake asks, we did a slate roof with your system. It was complicated because you cannot compress the slate. Absolutely, Drake, and that's why I would strongly encourage, when you talk with get in touch with Marshall Green. His email address would be Marshall, MARSHALL, at quickmountpv.com. And Marshall has had a fair bit of experience already in dealing with the idiosyncrasies of slate roofs. We do have another product variation we'll be introducing soon called I think we're going to call it our QBase slate roof mount, and is going to be the QBase shake roof mount. Both products will look the same, just have different installation instructions, and it will use our QBase that you had seen briefly when I was flashing through the slides, the gusseted QBase with the post and a cone style flashing. So that might be a more suitable product for certain slate roofs. Chris asked for clarification on the Bosch product number, and it's D. Yeah, you spelled it correct. It's D, capital D, and then a hyphen, TECT. Thomas Edward Charlie Thomas. So that's and 150 follows the D-Tech part. Catherine says the QMNS A 18 by 18 currently in stock. So we do have the slate roof products in stock, so you can do slate roofs. All right, folks, it looks like that's all the questions we have. I'll reiterate, for a free sample, click that Get a Sample button. Make sure you specify, if you don't want the classic composition mount, what product you want in the notes section. And we really appreciate your participation in today's webinar. Hope we can be of service for you. Alex wants a shout out to our sales team, and I will. We have wonderful sales people, Catherine, Jan, Carlos, Alex, and a whole host of folks out there to support your technical questions, your sales questions. Give them a call. Let us answer your questions. We are a people company, and we tend to, I guess, not feel terribly comfortable with having our customers not be able to get their questions answered by a live human voice as quickly as possible, and we tend to have any question addressed within 24 hours, at least the easy questions. The hard ones might take a day or two longer, but give them a call. Thanks to our sales team for doing such a wonderful job, and thanks for everybody again for participating today. It was wonderful having you here. We look forward to doing business with you, and always remember to respect the roof. Good day, folks.